Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins, filling in. Thrilled to be here just before the holiday. Happy Independence Day, almost to everybody out there. Chad will be back next week. I want to start where I guess CNN chose to take their coverage the other day. Don Lemon talked to Gwen Berry, the Olympian, or the to-be Olympian, I guess. She's been an Olympian before, though, who decides that she hates the American flag. Now, I'm going to play this audio, and there's moments where Gwen's going to say some things that don't make sense to me, and I don't want people to think I'm making fun of someone unfairly. These are answers this person gave when being asked to be a guest on national television. Whether CNN really qualifies as the same as some other organizations is, your decision to make. But they make no sense. These answers make no sense. And I guess I would say this about a lot of the activist athletes who are out there: at least be totally sure of what your message is when someone gives you the moment on a microphone as opposed to just standing on a podium. That's my take. It might be mean, but here is the first answer. Several answers provided as to why she did what she did.
Let's be clear. I do respect the Constitution because obviously I was exercising my constitutional right, but I will not stand for any type of symbol or song that does not stand for all people in America. And we need to be talking about the racial and social injustice issues that Black communities still face till this day. It's the same thing. And people are trying to divert the attention to a song and a flag when that's not even the biggest thing that we need to be focusing on right now.
Okay. Why do I really love how she ends that first answer to why did you do what you do? Because she says that people are diverting the conversation away from the issues that matter and to the issue of should Americans, Olympians, respect the flag. I'll play it again so you can really hear what she says at the end of that.
People are trying to divert the attention to a song and a flag when that's not even the biggest thing that we need to be focusing on right now.
Isn't that what you did? And I don't mean that, again, unfairly. Isn't that what Gwen did when she chose to protest during a playing of the national anthem? She chooses to focus the conversation, as does anyone who does it this way, on the flag, on respect for our nation, in moments when a lot of Americans feel it's easy to, at least there in that moment, as an Olympian even more so, respect the flag. Have the conversation. Go on the national platform, however, again, valuable CNN is, and the ratings say not that much right now. But go on those platforms, figure out the message you want to provide to the world, and then give it to them. Don't do the opposite, because that does focus the conversation where you don't want it to be. A little bit more from Gwen.
It's not that it's hard. It's the first verse. It's the third verse. It's all of these words: freedom, justice. It mentions slaves. These are things that do not hold true for all Americans. And that's just it. It's not true for all Americans.
And even the flag, because you said symbol as well.
A little bit of a pause here. Let's think about it.
I mean, we could say that.
Same thing?
I just won't stand for it.
Yeah.
I just won't stand for it.
Okay.
I could have a more complex answer. Some of us, Don Lemon, by the way, just throwing the softball out there. And the answer is, yeah, same thing. Flag's bad too. Here's my favorite answer, though, the third one she provided during her interview. It's one where she mentions taxes and that she does pay them.
And people have asked, and the criticism is like, well, if she feels that way, why is she representing the U.S. overseas? Why does she even want to do it?
I've been representing the U.S. my whole career. This isn't my first team. This isn't my first senior team. I've been doing that. I pay my taxes. I do all of this in America.
Okay. You pay your taxes. That's important. I didn't know anyone was going to ask you. Maybe she was thinking about some other news stories out there. But I think the most valid question, and the one that a lot of people ask, especially when it comes to U.S. Olympians, how important it is to demonstrate a pride in our country when you're representing our country to the world. That is tremendously important. There are people, there are other countries, there are enemies to our country out there that could view a demonstration of unrest as a valuable weapon they could try to use. And I know that sounds like I'm fear-mongering a tad, and maybe I am, But to be totally honest, I contemplate that. I really accurately wonder if when we demonstrate these kind of turmoil-esque things that happen in our society, that high profile, at least during the Olympics, high profile members, athletes, demonstrate their dislike of our anthem, our flag, if it says a lot more to our enemies about maybe what they should try to go after, what they should try to focus on in attempting to create more unrest within our country. Those are things that some countries enjoy to see, and our Olympians don't seem to care about it. And Gwen specifically is only worried about whether or not she's paying her taxes, which means that she can then, represent our country abroad during the Olympics because of her athletic talent too, of course. And she doesn't have to respect anything that is our nation or our flag. All right, I want to move on. MSNBC had a legal analyst on, a lawyer who actually dealt a lot during the Trump impeachment attempts that were made. His name is Daniel Goldman. He was talking about these charges on the Trump organization, these charges on Alan Weisselberg, and whether or not anything else is coming down the road. And he obviously gave the wrong answer. If you're MSNBC or anyone that wanted to hear, former President Trump doomed, someday they're coming after him. That is not what he said and not what he expects to happen. So a lot of this narrative, a lot of the coverage of these lawsuits and all the different teases out there in the media that so desperately wants a story one day that says, former President Donald Trump going to prison, it's just not happening. And I don't know how they're coping. I assume there's a lot of drinks involved. I don't know what it is. But here is the legal analyst saying Trump probably in the clear already.
They chose to fight this. That says something. It's typical of Donald Trump. But I am a little surprised that this ultimately ended based on these allegations in a criminal charge rather than a settlement. Based on the fact that he was in handcuffs today, he knew that was coming. He made that conscious decision to get arrested and get indicted rather than cooperate. And so I don't think we have any good reason to suspect that he is going to cooperate down the road.
That is Alan Weisselberg that he's talking about there, someone who would have been informed early about what the charges are going to be against him, who would have known that he would be arrested. And everyone out there, every news outlet that's saying he's flipping, and more things are coming. I'll just let the MSNBC legal expert take it from here.
So I don't see why that there would be additional charges against the Trump organization unless new evidence comes in. My guess is that they've evaluated this evidence. I don't really see any statute of limitations issues in this indictment that would have required them to do this now as opposed to later, which could be a reason why they are going to bifurcate any charges. So it's a little confusing to me. If they have more, why they would charge this. And for that reason, common sense leads me to believe that they're not going to have any more.
Oh, that was the wrong answer, according to some. I want to jump again. One other thing that I thought was interesting that occurred just the other day. The BBC reported on the release of Bill Cosby, but they confused their bills. And the bill that they threw out there is definitely a person that would be all over the news if he had gone to prison or anything else had happened, similar to what happened to Cosby, of course. But they threw out Bill Clinton, which is just an interesting name drop.
For the last 2 years, this has been where Bill Clinton has called home. But tonight, he will sleep in his own bed after the bombshell decision by Pennsylvania's Supreme Court to overturn his conviction of sexual assault.
Just to clarify what was said there in Michelle's introduction to the story, we apologise for the mistake. The story, of course, is about Bill Cosby, the entertainer.
I think I need that guy, the second BBC anchor, to correct any mistakes I ever make. I think that it just makes it so much more impactful to have to be clear, what we just talked about a second ago, we got our bills confused, and Clinton was not in prison for sexual harassment, even though obviously he's also been accused of a lot of terrible, horrible things in that same world. But man, oh man, is that an awkward and embarrassing mistake. But I guess according to a lot of people on social media, an honest one. A quick break, a lot more in just a bit. This is Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
Being antisocial sucks. Hang with Chad's friends on Facebook, The Chad Benson Show. And if you just need some alone time, head on over to Twitter at Chad Benson Show. Either way, we can't wait to meet the real you.
This is The Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins, filling in for today and today only. Chad will be back after the holiday. Happy Independence Day almost to a lot of people out there. Everybody in this country, whether or not the Olympians and some athletes want to celebrate our independence, I don't know. I'm always confused about what the latest thing to protest is. Ted Cruz wants to be president again. I thought this was interesting. Ted Cruz has been out there saying a lot of things recently, but whether or not he were to run again and have any shot, well, I think a lot of questions may be asked there.
Senator, we're out of time, but I have to ask you one more quick question. You ran for president in 2016. Are you considering a 2024 presidential run?
Well, sure.
Just considering, just thinking about it.
I am certainly looking at it. I'll tell you, 2016 was the most fun I've ever had in my life. We came incredibly close. Had an incredible grassroots army, 326,000 volunteers nationwide. And so whether it is in the Senate or whether it is in a presidential campaign, I'm committed to fighting to defend free enterprise, to defend freedom, and to defend the Constitution and Bill of Rights. And right now, the battleground is the U.S. Senate.
Well, I agree with a lot of things he said. Certainly the battleground feels to be the U.S. Senate right now. That is the more important push. But if Ted Cruz pops in there again, to be honest, I know that a horrible, terrible tragedy occurred in Florida, but watching the way that Ron DeSantis has handled that, and actually even talking to my producer Phil off the air about the voting or the gambling odds on who may run on the Republican side and be a likely candidate in the world of the 2024 election, Ron DeSantis feels like he continues to emerge as someone that can handle a crisis, someone that can speak to the nation at times if need be. There's so many check boxes when you look at what someone who wants to be the president needs to be. And Ron seems to keep checking those boxes, in my opinion. So it does seem as though he is more the heir apparent than, say, Ted Cruz. In other news, and this is certainly shifting gears, but it's almost the weekend. Why don't we do that? A man was chopping down a tree near his house. And I am positive, by the way, that the person who recorded this video that went viral is not the missus. This cannot be the spouse of this guy. And if it is, this is the most calm human I've ever heard react to this. But a guy's chopping down a tree, and it went the wrong way, and it crushed his house. Now, usually this is not humorous at all. I'm sure that the insurance claim is going to be rough. But there's something about just the casualness in the way the woman responds. And there is one moment where the guy is screaming no that made me at least want to play this audio today.
Oh, watch out. Here it goes. And it's going the wrong way. Oh, my gosh.
Ah, that sounds bad.
Well, that was not good at all.
It's just that last mention. Well, that was not good at all. That makes me so curious as to who this person is, because she does yell out, too, like it's going the wrong way, as though she does seem to care about, whether or not the house gets crushed. So it makes me wonder if maybe she is. But I can't imagine. Could you envision whoever you're with, whoever your significant other is, if you just crushed the house with a tree you cut down?
Well, that was not good at all.
I mean, maybe it's shock. Maybe shock is what plays in there for you to be like, it'll be fine. It's not good. And I know that this holiday, obviously, a lot of people are going to do some crazy things, maybe drink a little bit too much. Don't chop down any trees. And if you do, make sure to do it the right way. Do the triangle version of the cut so that it goes the direction you're cutting the tree down. A lot of Americans, of course, will be celebrating the holiday. A new survey found that 29% of Americans will barbecue and or picnic this weekend. 36% plan to spend the big day in a relaxing environment in their home. Not to do a little bit, but it's interesting to see how many people intend to spend just vegging out, just doing very little, as little as possible, because it feels right to me. It feels like we've been through a lot of things in the last however many months, year or so, I should say, and that if you want to spend this holiday right, if you want to have the most fun, just do very little. and maybe make yourself some round hot dogs. I don't know if you've seen this. This has also gone viral on places like Twitter. People are debating if round patty-shaped hot dogs are inappropriate as a July 4th, or I think a food ever. A lot of people have reacted very negatively to the selling point of some of the hot dogs, about $18. But here's the other thing, and something I saw emerge more recently in the round patty-shaped hot dog debate that I've enjoyed covering quite a bit. It's just bologna. A lot of people say that this is just a version of bologna, and then you're just putting it on the grill and then eating it with a hamburger patty. So it's not really an invention. And I can envision if maybe big hot dog is a thing, which I doubt it is, and in their marketing meeting saying that they're losing to hamburgers and they need to do something to freshen it up. But this really is a debate that's happening all over social media. Flat dogs, I think, is what they call them. And I've been wildly entertained by it because these are maybe the things our society can have more fun focusing on. Maybe every so often when the news of the day gets a little bit too big for too many of us, we just need to dive harder in to whether or not a flat hot dog or a flat dog is really an appropriate thing to have. And if somebody were making one, if you show up at the party for July 4th, they're doing the cookout, all the things that many of us will do, and then someone served you a hot dog on a hamburger bun, I wonder how you'd react to it. I've had a lot of people tell me, just personally, that they think this is a terrible, horrible thing. And I guess my hot take is I don't get it. If you like hot dog, I don't think you care about the shape, about the way in which you eat it, what bun it's on. But I think that's probably a hot take, as I've heard time and again, and that a lot of people need it to be the way that most make sense. Maybe I'll try one on air at some point. Maybe I will actually go ahead and consume one, throw a video up on some social media pages, because it's not that big of a deal to a lot of people, and I guess to me, but to a lot of others on social media, it's the most important issue of the day. So I covered it here. Quick break, a lot more. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Chad back after the holiday. I thought that Tucker Carlson had a very interesting take on the Vogue profile of Jill Biden, Dr. Jill. I thought that it was interesting and actually fairly funny. I know Tucker is in the news a lot right now for the things he said about the NSA and whether or not they care a lot about Tucker Carlson. I know the NSA has denied those things. None of that entertains me quite as much as this take on the Vogue article. Take it away, Tucker.
The reporters of Vogue magazine in New York. The Vogue guys do Stalinism the old-fashioned way. They are all in. They barely use verbs. It's all smoldering hot superlatives. Consider the new Vogue profile of Dr. Jill Biden, the scholar, scientist, statesperson, civil rights icon, healer, mother of a nation, eternally the first lady of our hearts. We could go on, but Vogue already did. Dr. Jill, we learn from Vogue, is, quote, driven, tireless, effortlessly popular, but also someone who reminds us of ourselves. That's right. She's us, but better.
Okay, I got to be honest, and I know that this is on brand for Tucker Carlson. This is some really effective sarcasm. I am very much enjoying, one, the ridiculousness of the Vogue article as well, and a lot of the coverage. If you watch certain news outlets that we've known for a long time are incredibly biased anyway, so not at all surprising to say it this way, but it's almost akin to some of the things we see in other countries, the gushing over anyone tied to this administration by some outlets it's uncomfortable, to say the very least. The interviews that are so simple and every answer is praised as though someone just cured some sort of horrible disease. It's just mind-numbing at times to watch the way these things occur right now. And I do think it's worse than it's ever been before. And the reason I think it's this, ridiculous right now, or this obvious, or that the affection is not being hidden at all, is because of how much all of these outlets hated our last president. It's not even that the people that are in office now are really doing that great of a job. The truth in all of this is that they just hated the last guy so much that they're overcorrecting that hatred to a degree that is nauseating. But here's a little bit more.
Who is this amazing woman? This servant, saint, humanitarian genius, medical missionary who still somehow has managed to stay beguilingly sexy at 69. What did America do to deserve her? Well, thankfully, Vogue answers that question. Dr. Jill, the magazine declares, is a, quote, joy multiplier. She multiplies joy. That's what she does. It's who she is. And by the way, Dr. Jill also shot an 18 on the golf course last week. Played the whole round in 22 minutes in between vaccinations and international treaty signings. It was a typical day for Dr. Jill.
Okay, that's a nice burn as well. Bringing in state media from other places, bringing in state media from North Korea, and just demonstrating the problem. We have a significant problem that we've known about for a while, that our last president touched on quite a bit, the disgusting aspects of some media places that are incredibly biased and no longer hiding it whatsoever. But there's got to be something quite a bit more uncomfortable, at least for me, in the way in which it seems that it's been brought up to 11 right now. All right, I want to move on to Trump Jr. Don Jr. was talking to Fox News. He was talking about the witch hunt going on, in his opinion, in New York. He did make a very valuable point about the way in which this is typically handled. We heard from other legal experts already talking about this is usually negotiated as a settlement, a fine of some kind. The Trump organization chose to fight it, which is interesting in and of itself. But here's Don Jr. on why it's just so ridiculous for everyone to care as much as they do in the first place, because the amount of money, not terribly significant in cases to this degree.
Correct. The New York Times could not find a single case in the history of the IRS, 230 years, not one case prosecuted criminally for fringe benefits. Not one. But they make sure to say it's definitely not political. It has nothing to do with political. They didn't charge the bankers that took down the global economy. They haven't done this prior in 230 years. But, Jesse, it's definitely not political, right?
Right.
Let's take the numbers even further, right? You're saying, they're saying $1.7 million over 15 years. But it's not $1.7 million. That's income. The taxable portion of that to New York State is 8%. That's $136,000 over 16 years. That's 10 grand a year. Half of that, because my father's a good guy, he paid for this guy's grandchildren's education. Our tax experts say that's not even taxable. You can pay for someone's education that way. So you cut it down. It comes out to like less than 10 grand a year. It's about closer to 5 grand a year if you take out the education.
It's very interesting. I wanted to hear that explanation include he paid for the college education of some grandchildren, and he's a good guy, and also just the amount of money that we're actually talking about, because it does start to feel, and I know a lot of people still hate the former president. A lot of other people obviously still like the guy, but it does feel as though this is political and not necessarily in any way, shape, or form something that is deserving of this much, attention in the media and other places, and even attention from, the DA and other people in New York. The legal system itself seems to be wasting some of its time as you hear it that way. And I know that Don Jr.'s biased, by the way. Moving on again, I really like this story. It popped up in the news the other day. A Florida man was caught on security camera screaming fireworks sounds in the middle of the night at the people, people that live close to him, because he's annoyed that they've been firing off real fireworks in his area. So how does he handle that? He doesn't go purchase his own. He gets up late at night. He goes up to the door and screams firework noises at the house. This is a funny way to I know a lot of people will enjoy fireworks this holiday season, and a lot of people will be annoyed by them. But if my neighbor did this, I would at least smile a bit, as maybe also getting annoyed that I got woken up so late at night.
The dogs were barking, and we go outside, and this guy is screaming. I mean, so loud. He seemed to be upset that people were celebrating early.
I don't know. I would so much enjoy, not necessarily because, I fire off fireworks. I don't. I'm actually one of the few in my own neighborhood that doesn't fire anything off over the next few days because it's covered. My neighbors have got that on lock. I don't need to. But I would like to live next to this guy. I do find this incredibly entertaining. And even just yelling the word firecracker is something that, I don't know. I know a lot of us have high tension right now. I see a lot of stories, some of them that end much worse than this, with people fighting on planes or pretty much everywhere. So I think that, everybody is at a very high degree of stress, tension, that fights don't need to happen and are happening in a lot of circles. But a guy just standing outside of another house yelling firecracker, for whatever reason, tips the scale to humor for me.
The dogs were barking, and we go outside, and this guy is screaming. I mean, so loud. He seemed to be upset that people were celebrating early.
I probably am saying I enjoy it a lot, but if I actually did live next to the guy and he did do it late at night, I'd probably immediately get very annoyed too. It is just an interesting way to voice a concern. Today is actually also a different holiday. I don't know if people know this. It's World UFO Day. This is obviously an interesting holiday to celebrate right now. A lot of talk about UFOs, aliens, all kinds of things as far as extraterrestrial life have been in mainstream news for the last month or so. Governments, our government, talking about these kind of things. Some of the bombshell reporting on it may be disappointing, as there was no confirmed alien. But as it's World UFO Day, some of the questions that get asked out there are, what would you do if the aliens invaded? And I know I've talked about before how disappointed I am that we no longer have Trump as president if that were to occur in the near future, which I don't think it is going to happen. But Biden is so much more of a guy that would just handle that boring. He would talk about reaching across the aisle to the aliens and making sure that we've made, impactful friends. And he would point to how maybe Europe didn't believe the United States could handle the alien invasion. Nothing like what Trump would be doing, both on social media if he still had it and just in general. But 80% of people in a new poll said they've thought about it before. What would they do if aliens invaded? And some of the top answers have been thrown out there. The number one answer is just hope experts and government officials will figure the problem out. I love that for a lot of reasons, as an answer to something as surreal as seeing aliens, invade our country or our planet, because government fails in so many other ways. I don't know why the number one answer from a lot of people would be, they'll figure this out. They can't figure out the basic stuff, but they'll get to this. Number two, people just answered the survey, what would you do, by saying they'd panic. And I thought that was terribly interesting and probably more accurate. If I was trusting the government to handle it correctly, I think I would also panic. Number three, start hoarding supplies. Everybody goes back to taking as much toilet paper as possible, I guess. Number four, barricade your doors and windows. The minute you see it, you're like, I'm locking down. I'm shutting down everything. I'm done with it. And number five on this list of the things people would actually do if there was an alien invasion, which is stupid news, but stupid news I enjoy, is get as far away as you can from any of the major cities. Just hide out in these smaller communities, because there's no way the aliens with advanced technology who just flew through space to come to our planet can find you if you're not in New York City and if you're hiding out somewhere in a rural part of the country. You'll be fine. That's a great plan. This is Craig Collins filling in. A lot more Chad Benson Show in a bit.
Warning, no snowflake zone. Uninformed opinions are in danger of melting. The Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Over 60% of voters don't think that Andrew Cuomo should run again for office. I don't think that number is even close to high enough, which is surprising to me. 23% of people that were asked this in a Siena College Research Institute poll said that they think he should resign immediately. 39% said just don't run for re-election. That is 62% of New York voters that do not want to see Cuomo as governor again in 2022. Only 1/3 of voters that were polled said that he should run for re-election. But that number is still surprisingly low. in my opinion. I know a lot of people say that is obviously valuable enough for Cuomo to hear it, but still, with all the controversies going on, with all the things that have been in the news that he has done, whether it's the stuff about the nursing homes, the stuff about the sexual assault allegations, or sexual harassment, I should say, allegations, all of those things would make you think that anybody that has an R next to their name would be politically much more damaged, especially in a place like New York, than Cuomo is. Oh, well. I also saw that Reggie Bush has asked for his Heisman Trophy back, and I think that's incredible. The NCAA changing a lot of the ways in which it will prevent, or at least now allow, athletes to make more money off of their name, their likeness, allow them to do what they should have been able to do for a long time, which is benefit over the high-profile nature of some of these athletes in college sports, because it's ridiculous to not let them do that. When you got a guy on YouTube playing Call of Duty that can make millions of dollars in his, teens, and then you've got a basketball player who's good enough to be in the NBA but chooses to play in college for a while that can't make $1 off of his name, our society has a problem. But Reggie Bush has acknowledged the fact, I guess, that because of those statements, maybe the NCAA has changed its mind about the money he may or may not have, I think confirmed he did, make while playing at USC, and give him back the old trophy. He said that so far he's had no response at all from the NCAA on that. It is nice that it would be above board, because I'm sure there's lots and lots of athletes who've been making money for quite some time, and we just don't really talk about it. We don't cover it as much as we did, and now at least it'll be something they're allowed to do, and the amount of money will be very interesting to see, the dollar amount. I know the NCAA is trying to cap some of those things. Good luck with that, because I think that you don't understand the lawsuits that have already occurred and the rulings that have already occurred so far. Welcome to the Great Resignation. That is the headline of an article I found talking about a couple different surveys, a couple different studies into whether or not the global workforce is interested in quitting their job after the pandemic has essentially ended in a lot of areas. I know some places still not. A study by Microsoft found that 41% of people in the global workforce would consider leaving their current employer within the next year. A poll from Monster.com, an employment website, reported that 95% of workers are at least contemplating a job change right now. There were a lot of experts asked to weigh in on this, why this would be. And I guess it's just self-reflection. You would take the time when you were locked down, when communities were closed, to really think about if what you're doing is what you want to be doing. One expert said, I'll put it this way: when your alarm goes off and you're in that moment between sleeping and being awake for the day, are you thinking to yourself, all right, it's time to start the day, I'm going to have a lot of fun? Or are you thinking, ugh, I don't want to be here? And even more importantly, and I think this is more generational from the studies I've seen, young people, millennials, Gen Z, seem to think that going to the workplace at all is just something they don't want to do, that being back in offices in and of itself is enough to make you want to quit a job. There's been a lot of coverage of that concept, and I guess it's more because of how many people loved working from home. And I get that. I do. I think that a lot of businesses have the right to have employees in their workplaces to make sure that the amount of work you're doing doesn't dip. Because that's something I've actually talked about with a few buddies, and I wonder how many people agree with it, is if there was a productivity, or lack of a problem in the world of productivity while so many were working from home during the time of the pandemic, it's probably because a lot of people knew this wouldn't be permanent. In my opinion, it's because a lot of people knew one day you'd be back in the office and you'd be answering to the boss for what you did, the amount of, work that you completed. And if you did it forever, and I know that people can be successful. I know that at-home jobs, working from home, that's a thing that we've had for a long time. But if it's something that's new to you and something you feel is more of a fringe benefit because of some things that have gone on in our society, I do see the eventual work just diminishing a little bit over time as you get more and more used to that. But that's just me. And apparently a lot of people at least agree that the great resignation is a thing that could be upon us. And it is interesting to think about that, too, with so many jobs open, with so many people in certain communities still capable of collecting unemployment, still capable of sitting at home and not getting into the workforce yet, that a lot of disgruntled workers may start mass quitting jobs. I don't know if that's exactly how it'll happen, but it would make going to some places probably even more difficult if you have less and less staff capable of maybe serving you food at a restaurant or whatnot. I also saw this story in the least shocking news of the day. Tesla owners do very well on dating apps. If you own a Tesla and if you put a Tesla in your dating profile app, you are much more likely than someone who doesn't own a Tesla to get a right swipe. This, again, is not at all surprising. It actually does. This is the only thing I thought was at least interesting about it. It boosts the profile of women even more than men. If you're a woman who has a Tesla, you had a 56% increase in the amount of people that would have interest in you, or excuse me, a 62% increase. If you were a man, it was just 56. And this does beg the question, should you lie about your Tesla in your dating profile photo? If you're hearing this story, if you're out there in the world, if you're single and you're wondering how you can get more interaction on the dating apps, I guess fake the Tesla is an option that could be out there. And then just see, at some point, if you roll up in a very different vehicle, if the significant other starts to ask why you're here in a Toyota Corolla, be like, the Tesla's getting fixed. More in a bit. Craig Collins filling in on The Chad Benson Show.
This is The Chad Benson Show. Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is The Chad Benson Show. I want to provide you with a scenario. The President of the United States, maybe not even the current one, just any President of the United States, goes out there in front of a microphone during a time of a crisis and kind of spitballs possible causes, possible reasoning for why something would happen, maybe some ideas that have been thrown his way. He just throws them out there, and he wonders whether or not they make sense to you, the American people. If that is former President Trump, if it's the time of the coronavirus pandemic, people are up in arms about how horrible it would be for a leader to just throw some ideas at the wall and see if they stick. President Biden, though, standing in Miami talking about the condo collapse, another tragedy that occurred, certainly not the scale of course, the pandemic, but still a horrible, tragic event, and starts spitballing about whether or not global warming is to blame. To me, these are pretty similar things. Biden even mentions the fact, President Biden, that he was being told this by people that are victims of this tragedy on their curiosity as to whether or not global warming played a part in all this, which tugs at some heartstrings. But to me, this is ridiculously over-politicizing and adding in political conversation to something where it's completely inappropriate and undeserving. And again, the big criticism of our last president when he did this regarding other things. I don't know why people don't care at all. And I know that's an imperfect analogy. I will admit it. I will take that. At the same time, I just don't get the fact that this is something that can just breeze by most people and not be considered inappropriate and or reckless to a certain degree to throw it out there. But here's what it sounded like.
Rational speculation about whether or not the rebars were rusted, whether or not the cement, whether it's limestone or not, whether or not. But a lot of the families who survived talked about how upset they were that in the last years that they've been here, how there was one condominium complex built across the street and a road was purchased, and while they were living there, they would hear the drilling and they'd feel their building moving and shaking. There are all kinds of discussions about whether or not they thought that water level rising, what impact it had. And interesting to me, I didn't raise it, but how many of the survivors and how many of the families talked about the impact of global warming, how much it, and they didn't know exactly, but they talked about sea levels rising and about how there were, and the combination of that and the concern about incoming storms, incoming tropical storms.
I have no words. At times, and that's probably bad. I'm in for Chad Benson, Craig Collins on the show today, trying to fill in and do a good job. I probably need to make sure I have words, but it's crazy to think when you hear something like that get thrown out in that way, when they're talking about, global warming during the time of a crisis like this, how politics play a part in every conversation that is had on the left. Every conversation there's no opportunity that is inappropriate to cover some of the topic. I think this is the reason why we struggle with vaccination numbers in this country. I truly do. I think the reason why we see a lot of people distrust the things that the government says is because everything by many politicians gets turned into politics. Even the coverage of the Delta variant, a variant that is going through our country, becoming the most dominant one for COVID-19, and certainly one that has health risks and health concerns for a lot of professionals out there. I know that a lot of Americans who choose not to vaccinate don't really worry about those kind of breaking news stories. And I can understand, whereas you see someone like the current president do something like this, spin a conversation to a political talking point, you start to wonder if Delta variant is just a political talking point. Is that just a creation? I'm not saying it is. I don't believe it is. But I can understand how people get there when you're seeing stuff like this happen all the time in the news. I want to shift gears again to Gwen Berry. Gwen Berry is the Olympic athlete who turned her back to the flag during an Olympic trial event. She placed third. A lot of people discussing whether or not she took the attention away from the people who placed first and second. And she also said that she was tricked because they don't typically play the national anthem during the trial events, according to her. And I think that might actually be true. But what is so interesting to me is she did an interview with Don Lemon on CNN. She talked about a lot of the issues of the day. She talked about how the attention has gone to the wrong thing, that she's trying to raise awareness for some things that are important, and everybody just keeps talking about this flag thing. And it's because of how you choose to protest. It's because of when you choose, how you choose to express your opinion. You're not trying to ask for more interview space on talk shows like this one. You're just, choosing to in a moment turn your back to the nation and to the national anthem, and then you don't know why the conversation devolves into being about that. Here's her saying that on CNN.
Let's be clear. I do respect the Constitution because obviously I was exercising my constitutional right, but I will not stand for any type of symbol or song that does not stand for all people in America. And we need to be talking about the racial and social injustice issues that Black communities still face till this day. It's the same thing. And people are trying to divert the attention to a song and a flag when that's not even the biggest thing that we need to be focusing on right now.
Within that answer, she said both things. She said that she can't care about the flag because the flag is something that doesn't represent her and people like her. And then she also said that we can't talk about the flag, and I don't comprehend that. She also mentioned when she was asked about, being a Olympian, getting to go and represent our country on an international stage, why that doesn't play into her decision making. And she mentioned that she's a taxpayer, which was confusing to me.
And people have asked, and the criticism is like, well, if she feels that way, why is she representing the U.S. overseas? Why does she even want to do it?
I've been representing the U.S. my whole career. This isn't my first team. This isn't my first senior team. I've been doing that. I pay my taxes. I do all of this in America.
I don't understand the tax mention at all. Somebody's got to explain that to me. You can go to my social media page, facebook.com/The Craig Collins Show, and tell me that if you want to, or tell us on the Chad Benson Show pages, because I don't get how that's relevant at all. And if anyone were to nitpick what she just said there to try to go after maybe some of the concept provided, if she's been capable of representing our country for her entire life, does that say something, maybe something small, about the debate that she's having? Maybe it's not the entirety of the conversation for sure, but her ability to be given the platform by our country to go represent our country in the Olympics, isn't that a good thing? There are countries that might not provide that to people and to all the people that live in those countries. We are not one of those places. We certainly would provide any athlete who's talented enough to compete in the Olympics the opportunity to go over there Isn't that a reason to like America? That's just me. If you're going to be sent by the country to represent us, you would think that maybe your opinion on the country, just on a personal level, might be a little bit more nuanced than it appears to be. I also saw this story in the news. It amused me quite a bit, totally shifting gears, which you should do every so often when the news of the day gets to be too much. Just go ahead and Google some silly things. That's what I do. A guy admitted on Instagram that he had used a filter to pretend he had fallen asleep and that masked tan lines had appeared on his face. He was one of several people to go viral that was doing this. Apparently, it's a new filter now on Instagram. And a lot of people were tricked by some of these stories because they were hilarious. Now, let's be honest. If you shared a photo of someone that looked like they had a tan line where the mask was all still there, that's genuinely, I thought, pretty funny. I was disappointed at the fact that I found out it was a filter this way via people admitting it to the news and not necessarily finding it on my own. But it's something that I think we all needed. Definitely a laugh that makes a lot of sense. And I'm very proud of the bravery it took for this one guy to come forward and say that it wasn't a real photo that went viral. It was just an Instagram filter. And I'm sorry for tricking all the people who cared. I don't think that's what he said, but I imagine that there was remorse there. All right, I got to take a break. A lot more in a bit. This is Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
Podcasts are American as hot dogs, apple pie, football, and sushi.
Oh my goodness. No.
Okay, maybe not sushi. Next time you have a craving for something sweet and tangy, download a Chad Benson Show podcast.
Boy, that is good. It's different because you get a little bit of saltiness. It's so good because it's sweet and salty at the same time.
Get a taste on iTunes, iHeart, or Spotify and binge to your ears' content.
Oh, yeah.
You're listening to The Chad Benson Show.
This is The Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. First, a quick flyby of some news of the day. The U.S. deficit is to hit $3 trillion this year. Thank you, Joe Biden. I feel like that's like the thank you Obama brought back. The government in 2021, the federal government is projected to spend $6.8 trillion. That is higher even than last year, while collecting about $3.8 trillion in revenue. Those are not good numbers. If I were just a regular guy running a regular business, I would think we're just a tad in the black. I want to move on to some other stories of the day, things that I find genuinely entertaining. I like this prank. I'm not much of a prankster. However, I do think that whenever anybody pulls one on a significant other, for some reason that ups the ante, makes it even funnier to me. A woman decided to prank her husband by pretending that, because there's been a lot of rain in some parts of the country, pretending that a snake got into the house and specifically got into the bathroom. The way in which she made it convincing is not only did she have a rubber snake that looked kind of real, she had tied a rope to it so that when she got his attention distracted, when she sent him into the bathroom to fix the problem, she could actually move it. I'm going to play the audio for you. The scream he has would work on any movie set, any scary movie, horror movie set in the future. You could just roll it over anybody and it would work out fairly well. Man, oh man, did this guy get afraid of what probably looked like just a regular garden snake.
Babe! What? There's a snake in the bathroom!
Are you serious?
Yes, I don't know. Maybe it just came in because it rained or something. I don't know.
There's no way.
There is. It's by the back of the toilet.
Step back. Wow, you're lucky.
I think that's tremendous. The moment that the snake moves, this guy was afraid he's just so afraid. I don't know if he ever gets over it.
It's by the back of the toilet.
Step back.
I feel like you learn something about someone you're in a relationship with if you can scare them that much, if you can see the reaction and it's that bad. I know some people would say maybe he's got a fear of snakes. Maybe somehow this is mean and people will accuse this woman of being a jerk somehow. I think it's incredible. And I'm not recommending you do it. This could probably end in a pretty terrible fight in some situations, but at least post it to social media if you do, because I promise to play it and get a kick out of it on any radio show that I'm doing. I also saw this. A guy chose to mash up SpongeBob SquarePants so that it sounded like he was singing Smash Mouth's All-Star. This might be a bit of a deep dive as far as the internet goes. I don't know exactly how viral this is, but it is tremendously entertaining to hear SpongeBob hit on an all-time classic, of course, being Smash Mouth's All-Star.
Well, the years are coming, they don't stop coming. Better that moves on it than running. Your brain is smart, but your head is dumb. So much to do, so much to see, so what's wrong with taking the bathroom? You'll never know if you go. You'll never try if you don't go.
I mean, there's some things we do, I guess. Maybe this was pre-pandemic. Maybe this was obviously, after the pandemic. But if you're bored, if you need to find a way to waste more time, I think one of the best things you could possibly do is go the road of the old SpongeBob mix-up mash tape and just see how that goes. Because I do find that also tremendously entertaining. And someone probably tried really hard to make that sound as good as it does. There were probably several takes, a lot of time spent on it, all to bring us that glorious end product. Eating more potatoes and baked French fries can actually help control your blood pressure. This is a brand new study from Purdue University. It's not getting the deep fried French fries, so don't go all the way to that road if you're going to have some snacks this holiday season. But it is cool to see that if you go ahead and bake it, if you go ahead and cook it a different way because of the potassium and other valuable items inside the old potato, that you could have French fries that are good for your health. If someone tries to argue with you about whether or not you're being healthy this holiday season with some of the snacks you've chosen to have, just go ahead and point that study out to them, and maybe they'll go ahead and back off just a bit more. I also saw that 1 in 11 Americans think that wine pairs very well with a hot dog specifically. A study by the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council, which, by the way, is a group I'd like to be a part of. If I can run to join any organization, I don't have to be a high-ranking member. Just put me somewhere on the team as far as the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council goes. And they are pretty biased, I guess. I should probably say that. When the study comes from people that care about the success of hot dogs in the world, you might not want to trust it. But 1 in 11 Americans say that wine is a great pairing product. 76% of people agree that hot dogs go well with just soda. 57% said beer. 54 lemonade. Iced tea 48. So on and so on. But 9 said wine. And actually 9 also said milk. They said that if you want this holiday season to have a really nice and enjoyable time, maybe you don't go with the typical drink products. Maybe you just dive in that world and you go milk. I also saw this poll out there in the world, things that people do, crazy things that people do in their cars. I kind of thought this survey was going a specific direction, and it didn't go that way. Actually, most people who answered the weird things they do in the car question said talk to yourself is the number one answer for a lot of people. A lot of people just have a conversation. If nobody's in the car, maybe you're listening to the radio. Hopefully you're listening to the radio, but you just kind of talk. And I don't think that's that weird. 48% of people actually say that they enjoy talking to themselves. 42% use the car as a time to cry. I'm not sure specifically what it is they're crying about, but I guess that's a good spot for that. 40% have said that they have epiphanies while they're in their vehicle, more so than other places. If you've ever been to Reddit, you know that shower thoughts is a thing. People have epiphanies in their shower. I guess 40% say, no. The car's a better spot for that. 37% of people said that they shop online inside their car. I assume this is while you're not driving it. I hope it's while you're not driving it. But all of those numbers beat out some of the other things that we might have thought of originally when we heard about this survey. All right, I got to take a break. A lot more in a bit. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Chad is back after the holidays. I thought that this was interesting. I saw this on CNN as well. Mike Shields is a strategist for the House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy. He popped up with Poppy Harlow talking about the insurrection, the newest panel that's been created by Pelosi to look. Was not covered in the impeachment attempt and everything else. Now we have yet another version of what a lot of people say is a political investigation, more so than an actual desire to gain the truth. That does include this strategist. He did make it apparent, and so did Poppy, that he is paid by Kevin McCarthy, but not necessarily for this opinion or on topics like this, for other things. Here's what that sounded like.
McCarthy, yes, I am a paid advisor to Kevin. I don't talk to him about this stuff because it's official business, but from a political perspective, this is a partisan committee. And Kevin did propose to do a bipartisan committee that would look at political violence. For instance, his colleague Steve Scalise was shot on a baseball field through political violence. Why would we only focus on January 6th? And the reason is pretty simple. Democrats know they're in a terrible position in 2022 to keep the House. They want to drum this up for political purposes, and they just keep talking about it over and over again.
Mike.
And so now they've created a committee where Pelosi gets sign-off even on any of the appointments that a Republican would make.
And you
Oh, hold on. She's about to make a point that I don't understand at all. And a lot of people are talking about this right now. When you talk about this, the latest government attempt to look into the insurrection is what a lot of people call it. I don't necessarily see it as that, but I'm just going to call it that. I guess it's easier. But when you talk about all this and when you look into this and the political movements that happen regarding this issue, you start to wonder why and how these things play out, in those closed door meetings that they play out. And then you agree, I think, if you're actually thinking about it rationally, a lot of what Mike Shields just said. But then comes the other point, the question being asked as to why that needs to be another aspect of an investigation like this. And I will say this about asking to investigate other political attacks, other things that happen in the same. Why is that a negative to Democrats? In all honesty, why broadening the scope? Why is there a problem there? I don't care if it takes a lot longer. Some of these politicians are people that say we need to get to the truth no matter how long it takes on all of these issues. So why does the scope have to be so focused on one thing that will create a lot of political feelings in a lot of the public? Why does it need to go that way? And she'll ask the question as to, if the minority was being too demanding, if the minority leader in his desires for the investigation itself, for the committee itself, for everything involved here. And the answer is no, but it's not necessarily articulated that way.
And you don't get every single thing you want. That last thing that he wanted wasn't even in this February 22nd letter. He added it later after Pelosi gave him literally everything he outlined in this letter. If you're in the minority, you don't get everything you want, then you don't look at an attack on the Capitol even when you were inside of it. Is that right?
This was a partisan process from the very beginning. The first proposal that Nancy Pelosi made was that it wouldn't be equal, that they would be in charge of the process. Here we are now. Look, she's basically gotten what she originally proposed, which is they're in charge of the process. It's political theater. There are currently, yesterday, the Washington Post that said that 12 more people in one day were arrested for this. The FBI is investigating this. There's actually juries and indictments happening, which, by the way, is great. I'm for that. I support the Capitol Police. I believe anyone who did anything on January 6th that's illegal should go to jail. That's exactly what should happen. But
Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah, that feels to be the end-all, be-all in this conversation. There are still things happening as far as people being held responsible for the crimes they committed that day. The former president of the United States did go through an impeachment trial as to whether or not he deserved to be held responsible for the events that happened that day. Why rehash this? Why go back to this? Why announce the new committee? Why appoint Liz Cheney as one of the people on said committee, a committee which did happen? And the reason is 100% to keep this in the news so that it becomes part of your thought process if you go to the voting booths in 2022 when it's harder to capture people's attention than during a presidential election. Keep the former president in the news in the most negative way possible. You got the lawsuit out in New York that was doing that up until recently, which I find very interesting. And actually, the MSNBC legal analyst that said that this is pretty much the end of this conversation, that it's probably not going any further, that we are going to have, for the most part, the end in the amount of things that are tried, the amount of things that are accused of having occurred here, that it all boils down to some tax evasion by the CFO of the Trump organization. And that's not news that a lot of media wanted to hear, but even
the fact that he was in handcuffs today, he knew that was coming. He made that conscious decision to get arrested and get indicted rather than cooperate. And so I don't think we have any good reason to suspect that he is going to cooperate down the road. So I don't see why that there would be additional charges against the Trump organization unless new evidence comes in. My guess is that they've evaluated this evidence. I don't really see any statute of limitations issues in this indictment that would have required them to do this now as opposed to later, which could be a reason why they are going to bifurcate any charges. So it's a little confusing to me. If they have more, why they would charge this. And for that reason, common sense leads me to believe that they're not going to have any more.
The person he's referring to in handcuffs, that is the CFO, Alan Weisselberg, who will be tried for or will be, go through the process with the Manhattan DA of, I assume you could still have a plea of some kind or a deal of some kind that ends this. A lot of these sort of things, according to a lot of legal experts and outside of courtrooms. So we'll see as far as the rest of the process goes. The Trump organization choosing to fight this. I don't know who owns this narrative, though. Much like the border became a interesting conversation beyond just the problems that definitely exist there and get worse all the time, but the way in which the former president choosing to travel there, having his town hall that did very well on TV, everything that Donald Trump did in relation to the border became a huge talking point on both the right and the left. It caused the vice president to go to the border for the first time since she's been in that office, which was interesting in and of itself. They all demonstrate the power that still exists in the hands, the fingertips, the tweeting tips, if he still had them, of former President Donald Trump. And you even have Don Jr. popping up on Fox News saying that the whole thing is a witch hunt. So I don't know who owns this narrative. Could this backfire on Democrats? Could they try to continue to dive in to the things like what happened on January 6th and realize that maybe it's not as politically powerful as they want it to be? There have been some experts in this field, in the security sectors, that have said that maybe a lot of things on social media that were being discussed long before what actually occurred, long before the rally itself or the inevitable attack on the Capitol, that some people were maybe planning this on social media, and they might have been some of the participants in it, which does point in a direction different than the direction that Pelosi wants this to go. So if they do actually investigate this in great detail, and since they are going to create a committee that seems totally designed to do that, you do wonder if maybe the end result of that discovery might actually be something they don't want, that there might actually be some more proof put out there that the former president wasn't quite as tied to the events of that day as maybe you think, if you're just being rational, if you're just viewing some of the tape. A lot of political speech is similar to the things that the former president said that day. A lot of politicians are very hyperbolic in the way they describe a lot of things and the way they encourage their voters to do certain things. I can give you several examples of it, as they did during the impeachment trial, actually, the second impeachment trial. I do want to quickly touch on the things that Trump Jr. said, though, because I do think Don Jr. has an interesting point in just how small of a case the New York one is and how it's absolutely also political theater.
Correct. The New York Times could not find a single case in the history of the IRS, 230 years, not one case prosecuted criminally for fringe benefits. Not one. But they make sure to say it's definitely not political. It has nothing to do with political. They didn't charge the bankers that took down the global economy. They haven't done this prior in 230 years. But, Jesse, it's definitely not political, right?
Right.
Let's take the numbers even further, right? You're saying, they're saying $1.7 million over 15 years. But it's not $1.7 million. That's income. The taxable portion of that to New York State is 8%. That's $136,000 over 16 years. That's $10,000 a year.
I actually am pretty impressed with the math being thrown out there by Don Jr. He goes on to say that because the former president actually paid for some educational things, paid for the college education of the grandchildren of the CFO of the Trump organization, that maybe that amount of money is even just $5,000. So it's not really a significantly large amount of money that will be gained throughout the entire process that is this whole very political court show that's going to occur. It'll be very interesting to see if that actually winds up being settled out of court and if this just goes away. One of several stories that news reports on and discusses that winds up just feeling different when the ground settles as far as things that involve our former president. I do want to touch on one other thing that's definitely not political news of the day, but I found interesting. Rich guys are going to go to space. Both Bezos and Richard Branson are going to space. Branson very proud of the fact, I think, that he will beat Bezos to space. I don't know if there's some kind of huge rivalry between these guys other than what we kind of imagine there to be in the news. But Branson put a video up on social media touting the fact that he's going up to space soon and he's beating Bezos by about 9 days or so.
Astronaut 001, Richard Branson. I'll be evaluating the customer spaceflight experience. As the Virgin Galactic founder, I am so proud to have this remarkable crew of mission specialists by my side as we fly to space.
That's the whole reason he's going, according to this video. He just wants to try out the customer process, the thing that he's eventually selling to you and me, probably not to us, to some people here in the country. He's getting a first taste of that, wonderful, wonderful process of being launched into space because you're a rich guy. Bezos also doing that. Bezos now is going to bring a very deserving person up with them, though, not just his brother. He will be bringing 82-year-old Wally Funk. Wally Funk is someone that has wanted to go to space for a long time but wasn't allowed to go. She talked about it recently, and this is a cool story. This is job well done. I will give credit to Bezos on this.
I got a hold of NASA 4 times. I said, I want to become an astronaut, but nobody would take me. They said, Wally, you're a girl. You can't do that. I said, guess what? Doesn't matter what you are. You can still do it if you want to do it.
We're going to fly you up into space on the very first flight. That's your...
I can't tell people that are watching how fabulous I feel to have been picked by Blue Origin to go on this trip.
This is a great marketing move, too. Wally Funk is one of the Mercury 13, a legend who was one of several people trained and people capable of going to space that were not allowed to go because they were women. So good move. Bezos, his brother, don't have to think about them so much. Just think about Wally Funk being there in space, and this is money well spent. But I am happy to hear this story. All right, I got to take a break. A lot more in a bit. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
The Chad Benson Show, where we reach across the aisle and occasionally poke someone in the eye.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. I thought Chris Pratt talking about working out with Arnold Schwarzenegger was an interesting conversation. Chris Pratt has a new movie out. He's been promoting the movie. He's also been talking about the fact that, of course, for most of the movies that Chris Pratt is in nowadays, he's got to get in pretty good shape. He is married to the daughter of Arnold Schwarzenegger. So why not ask your father-in-law if you want to go work out just a bit. And then also if you want to do some of the workout moves that are actually named after the guy you're hitting the gym with. It would still be intimidating, in my opinion, to be with someone in a relationship and have the dad be Arnold, even if maybe Arnold is not the same Arnold he was years ago. He's still Arnold Schwarzenegger.
It's awesome. I mean, when you're doing it and you're courting his daughter and potential son-in-law material, you're trying to hide the excitement of the 12-year-old Arnold fan. Once you get over that, it was really cool. I got to literally ask him about Arnold's. There's a shoulder workout called an Arnold where you have dumbbell and you bring it up over your shoulder and you bring your arm down. It's one of the first things I asked him. I said, that's called an Arnold. Like, where'd that come from? And he walked me through it, the physiology of it. I mean, the guy knows the body and he knows working out. So if I ever need tips, I know where to go.
Honestly, that is pretty cool. I would imagine that you would feel the same way that Chris Pratt feels getting to work out with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Although, again, if you're not going to succeed there, if you're not going to be in good enough shape, you might actually be doing more harm than good as far as the way that he feels about you after that workout. But it's just funny to hear him say that you kind of hide the fan that you are of the guy while you're out there working out with someone that obviously it sounds like he looked up to at some point in his life, and also just in general, a bodybuilder that rose to the stature of Arnold Schwarzenegger, whether or not you like him for the other stuff he's done in his life. I also saw this, that a flying car was successfully test flown, not just driven, but test flown recently. The car is in a road-able aircraft, is what it's called. It actually looks a lot like just a car with wings. It's capable of flight that's actually not quite as fast as I envisioned it to be. The vehicle has made 142 test flights, and this week traveled between the international airport in a couple countries abroad. It was converted from a car into an aircraft. The air car is currently powered by a 160 horsepower BMW engine. It has a top speed of just 118 miles per hour, but that will be upgraded to 300 horsepower engine, and it'll be capable of reaching 186 miles per hour. That is its top air speed. So, not, again, as fast as I envisioned it to be, but still pretty cool. It sells currently, the prototype is $2.3 million. So it's not exactly going to be accessible to a lot of people quite yet. But maybe this is the next move in the world of Tesla and everyone else. Maybe we get to flying car status. And I've actually talked to a couple friends about this and whether they'd be interested in one, whether this would cause mass chaos. And actually, the biggest reaction is Tesla can figure out how to drive a car for the most part automatically. There are certainly some very newsworthy mistakes that are made there by that technology. But maybe we get to a point where it's essentially autopilot. You have a car that you drive, and then when you need to take it off from the ground and go ahead and fly for a bit, you just throw it on autopilot. I know that would scare a lot of people because technology can be hacked and whatnot, but I would want a flying car just personally. I would love one, or at least I guess to test drive one just a little bit. All right, one other story in the news, and then we're going to have to take a break in a minute. Twitter has revamped its misinformation tags. I find this tremendously interesting for a lot of reasons. One being, and this is not Twitter, it's Instagram. I follow an Instagram account for a baseball team, the New York Yankees, and several times in the last few weeks, they've put up posts that are just highlights from games, or lowlights, I guess, if it's the Yankees, but highlights from games, and they're getting the misinformation tag, and they're asking people on these highlights to click on a link to go to more information about COVID-19 and the vaccines. And people on the Instagram posts have been questioning why this is happening, because it's a baseball team and a post about the Yankees, and the person running the account has no idea whatsoever. And I do think that that's probably the biggest problem, more so than them getting some of this information wrong, saying that something needs to be, fact-checked and then being wrong about it. Just putting it on wrong posts is probably a bigger challenge. I got to take a break. A lot more in a bit. Craig Collins, Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins, filling in. Thrilled to be with you. Chad will be back after the holiday. The jobs report is better than expected. The U.S. added 850,000 jobs in June. That was better than the 706,000 that were expected. The unemployment rate, though, unexpectedly rose to 5.9% versus the 5.6% estimate. A deeper dive into some of the numbers might demonstrate that wages were going up 0.3% and 3.6% year over year, that some of the jobs, most of the jobs created, might be higher paying jobs from bigger companies and potentially not jobs for part-time work or for smaller independent businesses. There's actually a lot of concern that these numbers and the rise in minimum wage and whatnot are making it impossible for small businesses to compete in this world. Fox Business's Dagan McDowell talked about exactly this a little moment ago on Fox Business, how these numbers are actually a gut punch to small businesses, even though the headline to many people will just be the simple jobs numbers are up. Jobs are up. That looks good. Unemployment up, and lower wage jobs, part-time work, definitely not up. They've continued to trend downward. Here's Dagan.
This screws over small businesses, the very businesses, the very entrepreneurs who have had the hardest time in the last year and a half because they don't have the heft and the reach and the price controls to manage their business the way that Amazon or any of the big box retailers did that have easy shipping, if you will. So this is another gut punch to these businesses because I see these individuals all the time, people who own small businesses like food trucks here in New York. These are people who get up when I do at 2:30 in the morning, and I see them coming home at 10 o'clock at night, and they work 7 days a week because they can't afford to hire people. So, and it's a tacit way for the government to implement a $15 minimum wage just by, via policy other than actually raise the minimum wage, John Hills.
It is a very interesting take, essentially saying that because of the need for so many businesses to compete against unemployment, and certainly some states fixing that problem by throwing out the additional unemployment benefits, that you have this real struggle that exists. And even though you have a promising jobs report, that jobs report may be disingenuous in some ways as to what's actually going on the ground. You actually also had Morning Joe talking about this issue a couple different times in ways that I thought was interesting today. Claire McCaskill was one of the people that was on the show talking about her own experience while being interviewed on Morning Joe about being at a hotel and it being understaffed.
I think it's a real worry. As you might gather by my background, I'm on the road and in a hotel room. And I will tell you from my experience over the last few days, people are understaffed. There aren't enough people working, especially in the service industry right now.
Okay, so there you go. You have a jobs report, 850,000 jobs out. Even Morning Joe talking about it this morning, and even guests saying that, it's disproportionate. These numbers are probably not as convincing as they should be, and there's industries that are still hit very, very hard just because they're not competing from a financial standpoint. Joe Scarborough also weighed in on this.
I wanted to follow up on what Claire was talking about, being in a hotel and it being clear that even though there's the demand, there just aren't the workers there. I was in Washington, D.C. over the past several weeks and would go to hotels that looked, you check into a hotel, but the restaurants weren't open, shops weren't open. So many things were not open for one reason and one reason alone. They couldn't find people to work.
Yeah. And so I think even Biden, during his whispering press conference recently, said that you just got to pay people more money. And if you pay people more money, then, of course, you're going to hire workers. But it's not exactly that easy for everyone that's competing here to be capable of paying that same amount of money. I do want to play one other thing. One other thing I found tremendously interesting, just as a side note, now that I'm discussing the Biden whispering that had occurred recently. There's somebody that on social media put whispering to jazz music, I think is what they called it, or smooth jazz music. I did find that tremendously funny, and I do wonder if maybe moving forward, a good way to do these press conferences, if Biden is intent on whispering more, would be to just have somebody in the back, maybe somebody famous, just riffing on the guitar a little bit. And since I mentioned it a second ago, because he did say that people should get paid more as a way to fix the competition problem, and you see the unemployment numbers and whatnot going a certain way, that we could revisit this.
A few questions before the helicopter leaves without me. I got them $1.9 trillion relief so far. They're going to be getting checks in the mail that are consequential this week for childcare. I wrote the bill on the environment. Pay them more.
That's the one. That's the mention right there. I'm going to keep going. There's a little bit more of this.
This is an employees bargaining chip now. This is about who gets to judge whether your vote counted after it's been cast. Think about it. Employees bargaining chip now. What's happening?
I always love ending it there because he actually said what's happening during that press conference, and a lot of people were wondering what was happening while they were watching that press conference. But the jobs numbers higher than we expected, but there is some deeper dive information into it that should worry a lot of people and worry a lot of small businesses as far as how and why these workers are returning to jobs and how you're going to staff your own company if need be. I also do want to touch again on Tucker Carlson. Tucker talked about the Vogue article on Dr. Jill Biden. A very interesting article in the way in which it praised the First Lady. A lot of the things that it said seemed to be flagrant exaggerations of maybe how people feel. It did feel like state media for sure, and I think Tucker was at his funniest while discussing this topic.
The reporters of Vogue magazine in New York. The Vogue guys do Stalinism the old-fashioned way. They are all in. They barely use verbs. It's all smoldering, hot superlatives. Consider the new Vogue profile of Dr. Jill Biden, the scholar, scientist, statesperson, civil rights icon, healer, mother of a nation, eternally the first lady of our hearts. We could go on, but Vogue already did. Dr. Jill, we learn from Vogue, is, quote, driven, tireless, effortlessly popular, but also someone who reminds us of ourselves. That's right. She's us, but better.
Effortlessly popular is a phrase that I hope gets said about more people because it's just that makes no sense in a lot of ways. But effortlessly popular, one of the many adjectives they used to describe Dr. Jill. Tucker went on a little bit more.
Who is this amazing woman? This servant, saint, humanitarian genius, medical missionary who still somehow has managed to stay beguilingly sexy at 69. What did America do to deserve her? Well, thankfully, Vogue answers that question. Dr. Jill, the magazine declares, is a, quote, joy multiplier. She multiplies joy. That's what she does. It's who she is. And by the way, Dr. Jill also shot an 18 on the golf course last week, played the whole round in 22 minutes in between vaccinations and international treaty signings. It was a typical day for Dr. Jill.
There are several examples of this in mainstream media in the last however many weeks or months it's been. But they just continue to cover the current administration in a way that's so interesting. And the current administration was locked down for a while. They didn't really do a lot of these interviews. Maybe they didn't realize how easy they were going to be. But now as you see press secretaries and other people pop up on some of these interviews and media gush all over those individuals, it gets tremendously disappointing to think about what actually should be occurring in the world of, mainstream media. But we're far from that ever being a reality, and certainly much more in the Vogue version of how these things are talked about. 8% of Americans hate fireworks. A new poll found that 8% hate them. That is depressing, disappointing, just in time for the holiday. 75% of people said they either love or like fireworks. Those people are true Americans. To me, 12% said that they just mostly dislike them, so not quite hate. But that does mean that 20% of Americans are not going to have a great time over the next few days. And to the 20% who are in that category, I apologize. I very much enjoy fireworks, and who knows, I'm sure that I'll be enjoying some in my own community. Whether or not those are me firing them off, I will not admit or deny that. All right, a quick break, a lot more. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
You stink like fear and white male privilege to me.
I do often out myself verbally as a gender. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm proud to be a gender.
Are you stupid? What? Are you kidding me?
Not a great way to use your white privilege.
Some people get it, some people don't.
You're listening to the Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Job numbers out higher than expected. Some bigger companies doing very, very well. One of those bigger companies, of course, is Amazon, that has done fairly well throughout the entirety of the pandemic as a lot of people turned to them when a lot of other things were shut down. Not really such a great company, though, if you're a contractor, if you're someone that does deliveries, whether it's just the driver themselves or maybe the companies that work with Amazon. Two companies out of Portland, Oregon, offered an ultimatum to Amazon: give us better conditions, improve revenue, improve driver safety, do all those things, or we are done working with you. Now, what's unique about this story and why it's out there in the world is this was the only client that these two companies had. Essentially, by threatening Amazon to no longer work with them, to sever their ties, they were shutting down. They were, sending all of their employees to the unemployment line, or I guess to go find other gigs. Amazon said no. They refused to make their service any better, the conditions any better, any of the things these companies were fighting over. So the contracts ended, and the companies essentially now have no business. They actually were quoted recently in a letter they sent to Amazon that says Amazon's conduct over the past 2 years has become intolerable, unconscionable, unsafe, and most importantly, unlawful. And those attorneys who represented those companies said that this is the biggest reason for this fight. Whether or not there's any success that can come from this, whether or not several other small companies join in on these kind of fights and start leveraging those risk factors, I guess, or whatever it would be for Amazon. Here's the truth, though, in my opinion, and it's obviously bad news for companies like this. I think Amazon can survive it. I think Amazon can move on. I think if the product, even the service itself, got somewhat worse for the consumer, it wasn't the 2-day turnaround or the 1 day or the day of, in some situations, turnaround. I think most people, unfortunately, would still turn to Amazon for a majority of their shopping. So I think that company knows it. I think that company is not afraid of these sort of cases coming through. But it's something that they certainly do, of course, rely on right now. Amazon outsources everything. The products that are sold on their platform are by some companies, mostly by other companies and not them. And then it's delivered by companies that are not them. Amazon's delivery service partner program, which launched in 2019 to compete with FedEx and some of the other ones, relies on 2,000 small delivery companies that employ 115,000 drivers in the United States that deliver billions of packages each year. So if everyone band together, if you did have something like that happen, and Teamsters and other unions have announced they're trying to coordinate some of those things for other employees at Amazon, then who knows? Who knows where you go? Who knows what the end result of that is? But I do think that company, which is shooting its CEO into space after he quits, is probably just not worried and feels as though they're above any kind of fights like this. And I don't know how much worse it has to get, because in regular news, you've heard a lot of the terrible things that Amazon drivers go through to hit their deliveries on time. Things like peeing in a bottle inside a truck, not being capable of getting out for a bathroom break because of the timelines you're under. But those things unlikely to get much better, in my opinion, if Amazon can just say, it's not us. It's these other companies we work with. We have these contracts. We have these expectations, but it's up to them to make it right and then to reject when any company asks them to fix things. I also see that the experience of GOMO is now becoming a thing. Other people used to be afraid of FOMO. That was a fear of missing out. Now they're much more afraid of GOMO, which is a grief of missing out, according to a new poll. Some of the things that we get GOMO about, I hate the sentence I just said. To be honest, I feel like this whole topic now, I can't believe I just stated the things we get GOMO. Immediately start laughing. But here they are, the things that cause us grief of missing out. People, oh man, if they see someone eating out and they didn't go eat out themselves, maybe people are still afraid of eating out in some communities, in some areas. Obviously, that's something you should probably get over and just do it. Whether or not the staff in the restaurant can handle more people going in is another conversation. But 60% get GOMO about eating out at a restaurant. Characters shopping in person at stores and malls. This is something you get GOMO about if you see it on TV. If you see someone going into some places that you hadn't been going into, there's a grief that you get from missing out on doing that too. Also, seeing people going to the movies is something that might cause you some grief of some kind, whether it's social media or seeing it on any kind of television, whatnot. People swimming is something that gives us GOMO. I hate this topic, and yet I keep doing it because it's entertaining me at least a little. Watching people have new experiences in general, whether you see something on social media where someone's like, for the first time, I traveled to this country, or I did this, or I did that, you get a grief of missing out on that kind of thing. Because really, a lot of social media, a lot of the things we consume today just hurt us. They're just not good for us. They're bad for our brains, and yet we keep doing them anyway. But this is the first and last time that I will ever talk about GOMO. I am now officially done for it, both in my professional and regular life. I will never bring that up again. Knock on wood. I hope this doesn't happen More than 80 people were caught in an illegal group, an illegal ring. What I found interesting about this story is it was a coupon ring. Authorities in Houston closed in on an illegal group of people that were creating fake coupons that they would use at places like Walmart and Kroger. One estimate claims the ring is responsible for $10 to $20 million in losses for these companies. Authorities did locate them in Montgomery County, Texas, near Houston. They found a lot of the information, and the ring was known as Dark Side online. I don't know if that's what you picture, but what I picture when I think of an illegal coupon ring that's calling itself Dark Side is that when you actually get to the belly of the beast, when you get through the whole investigation and you find the individuals responsible in a place like Montgomery County, Texas, that it's just old ladies, that it's just old women that didn't like the coupons they were getting in other places, and that these are the masterminds behind this. It's nearly $550 a day in losses. It is crazy. Craig Collins filling in. More Chad Benson Show in a bit.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins filling in. Chad will be back after the holiday. I want to quickly touch on something that the president said recently. He was talking about the horrific tragedy, the Miami beach condo that collapsed. Still, some search and rescue being attempted. Of course, every day that goes by, things get graver and graver there for any kind of hopes that family members would have of missing individuals being found. President Biden spoke about a few different things, his experience talking to families and victims of this. And then he delved into this weird version of political speech where he blamed, or at least said that some of the families are wondering if global warming is to blame and not the horrible structural things that were noticed and ignored by the community and those responsible for this. Obviously, the associations involved that rejected any kind of repairs or prevented those from happening more quickly. The amount of photos, the amount of information that has emerged as far as the danger that this building potentially had demonstrated to many professionals and was being ignored is the real problem, not how Biden sees it. Biden wants to talk about global warming.
Rational speculation about whether or not the rebars were rusted, whether or not the cement, whether it's limestone or not, whether or not. But a lot of the families who survived talked about how upset they were that in the last years that they've been here, how there was one condominium complex built across the street and a road was purchased, and while they were living there, they would hear the drilling and they feel their building moving and shaking. There are all kinds of discussions about whether or not they thought that water level rising, what impact it had.
Okay, it's brainstorming, just doing a lot of the brainstorming. Now let's go ahead and switch to the political speech stuff, which a lot of people would say has no place here, and certainly reminds me, granted very different scenarios, of some of the times that our past president would spitball ideas when, tragedies or whatnot were occurring, just spitball with the public as to whether or not this was a potential cause. And you remember it most clearly with him talking about COVID-19 and some of the solutions and or problems that exist there. And he was vilified on all forms of news, all forms of any kind of conversation about it. The current president can do this during a tragedy in Miami, and it's mostly a nothing burger story.
And interesting to me, I didn't raise it, but how many of the survivors and how many of the families talked about the impact of global warming, how much it, and they didn't know exactly, but they talked about sea levels rising and about how there were, and the combination of that and the concern about incoming storms, incoming tropical storms.
That is a very interesting, completely separate, makes no sense to dovetail into. And he claims that it's not him. It wasn't Biden who was talking about that. It was the victims of a tragedy that were bringing up whether or not global warming is the cause. When I've said there's a lot of information out there, a lot of inspections and other things, photos that have gone viral demonstrating some of the problems this building ignored. And that seems to be the real issue. Facebook warns users that they may be exposed to harmful extremists. There is information that Facebook had a pop-up that was displaying to several of its users. It was a notification that said that there might be some extremists that exist and some extreme content that might be getting shared on its social media platform. The new feature was documented by Red State and several other places. It was also shared via screenshots to other social media platforms like Twitter. It said, has anyone seen this message on Facebook? A friend of theirs got it recently, and it's just a disturbing pop-up that reads, are you concerned that someone you know is becoming an extremist? We care about preventing extremism on Facebook. Others in your situation have received confidential support, among other things. And then there actually is a button that says, click on to get support. Wow. That is a heck of a story and a heck of an odd move in the world of social media to not only, worry like Twitter now has a new version of its pop-up. When you put something on Twitter that it thinks is not true, it goes ahead and adds a fact check to it. But Facebook is taking it one step further, going into whether or not it can locate, find, and figure out who extremists are based on what your friends think about the stuff you've been putting on social media. There's probably a valuable component to coming up with a way to more quickly find and address the most concerning of things that are put out publicly on social media. Certainly time and again, we hear stories about someone who did something terrible, who had shown all the signs on social media. But I don't think it's Facebook's job, or they'd be a good person or a good company to take on this kind of challenge. I don't think they're the right ones to put into their hands how we figure this out. So I do think moving forward that if you find any kind of way to more quickly respond to worrisome social media posting by specific individuals, that happens through the government. The other thing that's so interesting about any version of that conversation is it appears to me as though Facebook, social media, Silicon Valley is trying harder and harder to separate every aspect of the job, every aspect of its organization from, any kind of government insight, overreach, whatever you want to call it, because of a fear of being broken up. I think a lot of these companies know that deep down they are monopolies, the same way that monopolies existed in the past. They fully control a certain aspect of an everyday experience for most Americans, and they need to be changed in a way that is significant, in a way that actually causes more benefit than harm, which certainly happens very often when any of us go ahead and use social media. I do just think that we're in a weird world, a weird place as far as that is concerned, and that the only solution is to not involve the companies responsible for that sort of thing. There's just so much more to get to in the news of the day. I know the holiday is coming up. I saw this story, and I'm confused as to why anyone cares, and yet I'm going to hit on it because I am. Jonathan Taylor Thomas, JTT, is a celebrity that probably only a portion of this audience even knows to be a celebrity. He was a heartthrob in the 90s, I guess, and he's someone who was photographed for the first time in a long time, according to Page Six. In 2015, he made a short TV appearance, but he hasn't been seen or, I guess, photographed in a long time. And this was on the cover of some news things, like the back page story, like the Page Six story. And it's just so amusing to me that anyone would care. I have to be honest. I don't know what other celebrities out there are on the level of the JTT as far as like, look, we got a photo of him. But that's a weird place in the world of celebrity status, that people would celebrate the fact that they found you again after all this time, and that maybe, that photo is somehow valuable. I didn't care beyond just, I guess, mentioning it here because I couldn't get away from it. People are being asked what their July 4th plans are. Most Americans will just be kind of vegging out and staying at home. 29% of Americans will barbecue and or picnic this weekend. 36% plan to spend a big part of the holiday doing nothing. I do think that that's a good move. I think that a lot of us have dealt with a lot. If you want to go out, see some fireworks, have a little fun, it makes sense. But if you want to take the long holiday, including the Monday observed holiday for a lot of people, a lot of employers do it that way. I think it makes a tremendous amount of sense. Only 9% actually plan to see fireworks somewhere. 9% actually plan to set those fireworks off, which is interesting. 8% will go to a parade or local event, even though depending on what community you're in, a lot of those parades are still getting canceled. 5% of Americans are going to go to the beach, and 4% plan on having or playing a round of golf this holiday season, this July 4th. My vote is to do nothing. I don't know why that's my vote, but that is my quick reaction, is that it would be the most beneficial to me and maybe a lot of people to just sit around and do nothing. One other quick story in the news, and then I got to take a break. Dak Prescott has decided that he's not going to talk about whether or not he's vaccinated. He is not going to reveal his vaccination status, and he said that that's a personal decision, and we all should probably just operate that way. The Dallas Cowboy quarterback said that he was being honest in his conversations about it, but he thinks that this is probably a bit too much for a lot of us. He actually said specifically this: for me, I think it's important just for everybody to educate themselves on the reasons why to get vaccinated and why it could either help in their case or maybe help the world, but it's not necessarily something I'd like to share or something I'd like to promote or say. And I do think that actually this is a fairly wise position, and one position that a lot more of us should take, because I have said it this way, and I don't know if this causes more backlash or not. And I should preface, this is Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show before I say it, so any anger should be directed toward me and not him. But I do believe it's your choice to get vaccinated. I do believe that a medical procedure, however small, and with data out there that convinced a lot of people that it was the right move, that you're still allowed to say no to that. You're still allowed to live your life and not be comfortable with whatever potential risks may still be discovered, may still wind up, hitting the news and reinforcing the decision not to get vaccinated. And even as the Delta variant or other things become more and more of a concern for medical communities, it's our own individual choice. And since the vaccine is now so available that if you hadn't gotten it yet at this point, you can actually find an appointment today in most communities throughout the country. We're in a place where you can't go backwards. You can't stop shutting down or going back to any of these requirements of things like masks that are getting debated again. The World Health Organization advising people to go back to mask wearing. Of course, the CDC here in our own country saying that's not really true in America, which is good that they went that road. But I see all this debate, and I see Dak Prescott talk about this issue, and I just think we've gotten far enough in the availability of a potential solution that alone sort of ends the conversation, and we cannot take it the step further to tell people what they need to do, even if government officials don't all agree on that. All right, I got to take a break. A lot more in a bit. Craig Collins filling in on the Chad Benson Show.
I usually don't get into politics. As an ordinary suburban housewife, I feel a little disrespected. I teach my children not to name call. You are a blabbermouth!
Come on, man. Guys, can we please keep the chatter to a minimum?
Chad Benson.
Just a loudmouth.
14. This is Craig. This is the Chad Benson Show. Oh man, I just steered into a bunch of gears there because I was so distracted by that great intro. My name is Craig Collins, filling in. I just saw this story. Meet the mother-daughter duo that is competing in Nathan's 4th of July hot dog eating contest. The mother-daughter duo involved two women, 162, 133, that will, of course, have a lot of fun at an eating contest. It made me immediately think, though, if you were to sign up for one of these things with a family member, you would immediately care about just beating them. I don't think that a lot of people would be going after Joey Chestnut and his 75 hot dog record that he threw down last year. It would be much more important just to take down the one person you showed up with. And maybe that is a good way to goose the competition itself, a good way to goose things like that, to see, a lot more interest in these kind of events, because I think that a certain amount of people care. And yet, if you just saw a few family members going after each other with probably way less than 75 hot dogs, I would at least be somewhat captivated by that's just holiday news that I figured I'd share. I also saw that a guy has invented a ice cream machine that actually specifically turns beer into ice cream. A cold pint of beer can be turned into a delicious soft serve. A U.S. investor created this machine, has applied for a patent for it. It also works with cocktails and any other drinks. I feel like these sort of things probably already existed, but maybe the specific focus is the thing. The below zero machine can take any beverage and crystallize it in under 30 minutes, keeping the ABV exactly the same, meaning you get just as drunk on the ice cream as you would on the beer. And I feel like he really should have had this hit the market a lot harder in time for the holidays. It's probably something that should have popped up on Shark Tank. It's something that would have been tremendously interesting there. The guy is out of Illinois. He hopes to develop more things like this in the future. And as I said, get them marketed more heavily. But I can see a lot of people this holiday season being interested in turning your beer into ice cream, certainly with the heat wave and everything people have been dealing with there. I also saw, though, that the cost might be somewhat of a limit for a lot of us. $6,000 is the cost for one of these machines. He's actually looking to sell it to a lot of bars and restaurants, not necessarily to people just throwing a 4th of July party. But hey, I don't put it past anybody. Maybe go ahead and figure it out because it does sound like something that I'd at least have fun with. Star Wars is prompting some fan backlash because it has changed the name of a spaceship. I don't even know. I'm not a huge Star Wars nerd. I know they're out there. And I say nerd with affection. I don't mean that as an insult. But Slave One is the name of an iconic space cruiser. It belonged to Boba Fett, a character in the show. The Lego Star Wars set is going to change the name to Starship instead of calling it Slave One. This is the beginning, I guess, of a lot more Disney-related products and or Disney focus on removing some of these quote-unquote unwoke names that exist in the world. And I do wonder if maybe the end of the woke revolution is at the hands of the Star Wars fans. I do think that if you make a certain community mad by overreaching in the world of changing names of this or that, and you actually land on Star Wars fans, there is a substantial chance that it will be so overwhelming that maybe Disney decides against what they've decided to do here. Maybe they change their minds, and maybe we start to see the crumble that is the woke generation pushing for everything to be as PC as possible. I'm not sure. I don't know who I bet on in this fight, but I think the Star Wars fans have a shot, if anybody does, at causing a lot of impact even beyond their own unique interests. All right, I want to move on to this, too. A guy was very mad in Florida about the amount of people firing off fireworks in the community. He stood outside some of the homes, was caught on security camera, making firework sounds and just screaming the word firecracker as his way to get back at neighbors who were firing off too many fireworks. This is pretty hilarious.
The dogs were barking and we go outside and this guy is screaming, I mean, so loud. He seemed to be upset that people were celebrating early.
Even the last shut up in there obviously demonstrates that this guy is getting what he wants and just yelling firecracker and everybody else getting mad. I don't recommend this as the way that you object to your neighbors if they are a little firework heavy. Actually, fireworks seem to be one of the industries hit by all the different complications of the past year. So it does seem like we have a lack of supply, according to some. Supply chains have been impacted in the world of firecracker. This guy in Florida probably doesn't believe that story and obviously thinks that he needs to let his neighbors know he's not a fan of how often they've been fired off. But it is tremendously amusing to me the way in which he was original about making that complaint. Late at night, without any sort of explosives, he's trying to share his pain with the rest of his community by just pretending to be a firework of some kind. I also saw this story in the news. An Ontario couple discovered a garbage dump in the backyard of a house they bought over the winter. If you're living in Canada and you're going through the process of buying a home, you probably should try to get through all the snow in the backyard a little bit more if you can, because this giant dump of garbage is going to cost over $100,000 to repair. I feel bad for them. Not a great holiday weekend, although I guess it's not there. All right, this is Craig Collins filling in. Chad Benson, luckily back soon.
This is The Chad Benson Show.